All right. So welcome, beauties, to this month's B.O.L.D. Party with Purpose. For those who may not know, B.O.L.D. that stands for Beautiful, Outstanding Ladies of Destiny. And it is a group that I started because I truly desired to connect with other women and to be able to encourage and also be encouraged in this journey of life and growth and becoming the woman that I am meant to be. And through these parties with purpose, we have them each month. We take a topic and focus on it and hopefully learn through it, as well as be able to share with each other and to continue to help each other to grow, as is the mission for B.O.L.D. to inspire, to empower, to educate, and enlighten, and also to help create community. And this month, we are focusing on noticing the narcissist. And if you don't know my story or part of my story, I was in an emotionally and mentally abusive relationship in high school. So this is definitely close to my heart. And also with October being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I felt this very appropriate. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our morning exercise. And this morning, I feel like it probably will be easier for me to just do this over the speaker rather than trying to pull it up, bump the videos a little bit. So this is a breathing meditation from My Life, which is a meditation app that I like to use. Small plug. You can choose what things that you are feeling or how you are feeling, and they suggest different meditations for you that speak to what you are experiencing. So I really do like that app. Free plug, I get no money, but it's been beneficial to me, so I wanted to share with you all. And they do also have some of their meditations on YouTube. So there's that. But before I start it, we'll go ahead and do a little breathing. I ask that you close your eyes, or if you don't feel comfortable with that, try to focus on one spot in the room and try to clear your mind. So we'll start with some deep breaths. Go ahead and breathe in. And out. Again, breathing in. And out. One more time, breathing in. And out. So these next few breaths, we're actually going to hold. And when you are breathing in, go ahead and breathe through your mouth and try to fully fill your belly with the air. And then as you're breathing out, when you're breathing in, breathe in through your nose. Fully fill your belly with the air. And when you breathe it out through your mouth. And really try to press it out. Okay, so again, breathing and holding. Breathe in. Hold. And out. Again, breathing in. Hold. And out. And one more time, breathing in. Hold. And out.
Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion.
Can we hear that? Yes.
Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down through your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. And just allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your attention to the feeling of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. As you inhale, maybe your breath feels cool. And as you exhale, maybe it feels a little warmer. When your mind wanders, or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the feeling of your breath and allow thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
All right, so that was a little mindful breathing meditation just to get us centered for our time together.
I like that. Because I had to modify it a little bit. So I'm focusing on my feet as they were hitting the pavement. And I had to really concentrate because I couldn't feel really concentrate when the breath is coming out to get the feeling of it. I'm like, I don't feel anything. But I finally was able to get it.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, okay, I feel it coming in. I do not feel it going out, but I know I'm exhaling. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
I was, because I was like, okay, wait. I stopped. I was like, let me really get this feeling. I don't feel it. But it worked out.
Yes, but and that's my life meditations. You can find them on YouTube or their app. I really enjoy those.
I need to get that because I do struggle with being able to meditate. Anytime I try, I'm just like, can't focus. So I do need assistance. So I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah. I'll even put it in the chat here. I'll just YouTube. Yeah, those are good meditations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so getting into our topic for today, as the name suggests, noticing the narcissist, we are talking about narcissists and narcissism today. And I felt that it was a good focus. One, as I said, with this being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I thought it would be good to focus in on narcissism because narcissists are one of the, if not the top abusers. So I thought that talking about narcissists would and could be beneficial. And in my research, I've come to realize that though when we think about narcissists, or at least I personally, when I think about narcissists, I think about romantic relationships and those in relationship with narcissists in that way. We actually all encounter narcissists or people with narcissistic traits in pretty much everyday life, at work, in our families, at the grocery store. But being able to notice these traits and or these people can help us in knowing how to navigate with them. So I'm really excited for us to get into this today. And I wanted to go ahead and start with, what is a narcissist? And a couple of the videos will dive more into the definition, but just to get us started. According to Merriam-Webster, it's my favorite dictionary, a narcissist is one with extreme self-involvement to the degree that it makes a person ignore the needs of others around them. And this person frequently disregards others and their feelings, and they don't understand the effects of their behavior on others. And also they note that it is a trait, however, it may be a part of a disorder, which they call MPD. I don't remember what the P stands for.
I was like, what's the P?
1 second, I can find this. Narcissistic personality disorder.
I was thinking that. Not really, but we should have easily
Right.
thought that.
Quite simple. But yes, narcissistic personality disorder. So someone may have the narcissistic trait, or they may actually have the disorder. And then even within being a narcissist, it is a spectrum. So there are different types of narcissists. Some of the main ones being grandiose narcissists, vulnerable narcissists, or malignant narcissists. And from what I've been reviewing, those who are abusive tend to fall more into the malignant category. And the grandiose and vulnerable narcissists can actually be types within the same person. It just depends on where they are in their life, because those two are highly affected by the person's environment. And I'll share a little bit more on that here. So. Probably did. Okay, so the grandiose narcissists are people with this behavior. They most likely treat, or they are most likely treated as if they were superior or above others during childhood. These expectations can follow them as they become adults, and they tend to brag and be elitist. Those with grandiose narcissism are aggressive, dominant, and exaggerate their importance. They're very self-confident and aren't sensitive. But the vulnerable narcissism kind of goes on the opposite end of that. So this behavior is usually the result of childhood neglect or abuse. People with this behavior are much more sensitive. Narcissistic behavior helps to protect them against feelings of inadequacy. Even though they go between feeling inferior and superior to others, they feel offended or anxious when others don't treat them as if they are special. So, though both types of narcissism may come off or appear the same, at times, the background behind it can kind of drive the different aspects of how that person portrays them. And then as far as the malignant narcissist, wait, where did it go? Okay. I'm not sure where it went. Wanted to read it directly to make sure I didn't miss anything. But in short, the malignant narcissist is the one in which the narcissist with the narcissistic personality disorder falls into. But it is the type of narcissist that may display anger or even sadistic characteristics more prevalently. So that's just a little bit of the background on the narcissist. And then also something that I found interesting was that narcissists tend to seek relationships that feed their ego, and also relationships that reinforce their ideas about themselves, even if the relationships themselves are superficial. So yes, that I found really interesting. I'm still trying to unpack why that really stuck to me. But I feel in a way that because I was in a narcissistic relationship, and at times you do question, at times you're sure he loves me, I love him, this is love. And at other times it does feel really fake. Like, am I being deceived? So I think that kind of speaks to that part for me. But any thoughts on what's been shared so far?
Well, I was not aware that there were that many categories of being, a narcissist, whatever person. So it's really interesting, especially as you went through each form. I'm trying to just think in my everyday life, because I always think of, if I know anybody that's narcissistic, that it's more of the, and I'm gonna mess up which one is which. So not the one that which is the one where they're more, it's from their childhood experiences, you know, like child neglect.
The vulnerable narcissist.
Okay, so I didn't know that existed. So now I'm sitting back and thinking about people in my past, and I'm just like, oh, it's like an eye opener to be able to categorize them and know, because each category, like, you have to interact with that person in a different way, it would seem like. Like, you just can't treat all of them as, oh, he's a narcissistic person. No, there's a different attribute or characteristic that makes them that way. And so I feel like there's different avenues of how to approach that person, or, you know, be around them. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and also how different stages in their life, or basically the different relationships that they're in, say with their family, can also cause them to move in between those.
Right.
So like in the case with my ex, who was verbally and mentally abusive towards me, I did experience both the vulnerable and the grandiose types of narcissism, because he actually experienced both in his in his childhood. His mother was very attentive, gave him a lot of praise, you know, helped him with his modeling career and all of this, while his dad was distant. He was actually out of the house. He was in his life, but he was distant, didn't really praise him, put him down a lot. So he was always trying to seek his dad's approval, and would actually put down his mom, the one who was actually feeding the positivity into him, as well as the others who he welcomed into his life or sucked into his life, who loved and cared for him. So it's very interesting, very, very complex. And though they may come off with the 3 C's, as we'll hear about a little bit more in a minute, which was what draws you in, there's a lot underneath that you end up encountering and having to deal with. And this reminded me of the 9 official criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So for someone to be categorized with NPD, they must meet 5 of these clinically qualified factors. But someone who is narcissist can just have 1. So the 9 official criteria are a grandiose sense of self-importance, preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love, belief they're special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions, a need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, interpersonally exploitive behavior, a lack of empathy, envy of others or belief that others are envious of them, and demonstration of arrogant and haughty behaviors or attitudes. So again, those are the 9 official criteria for NPD, but a narcissist who may not necessarily have the disorder can have any of those traits. But to have MPD, they have to show 5 of those. So that's interesting. But the not so funny thing is that most people who may have MPD or maybe narcissists don't get diagnosed because it goes against to even be described as such. So it's more of a catch-22.
Can be diagnosed with something, or like someone with that type of, yeah, like how else are, like there's no need to be like, oh, something's wrong with me.
Leaders
like
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Forgot what I said. Oh, it just seems like it's easier for this to go undiagnosed, because who would they be talking to be diagnosed?
Right.
So,
And it from several of the resources that I reviewed, they encourage people to not try to address a narcissist as a narcissist, but rather try to get them to go to a professional, such as a psychologist or counselor. But that process isn't an easy one.
right.
So,
Oh, okay. Hold on. So, can y'all hear me?
yes.
You
morning.
said good. Good morning. You said that they're not usually diagnosed, but they just try to get them to go to get counseling. Is that what you said? Like they don't try to put that label on them, or?
So what I was saying is most narcissists or people with narcissistic personality disorder don't usually get diagnosed because it goes against their personal view of themselves or how they want to be perceived to be labeled a narcissist. However, though psychologists and counselors from the resources that I've reviewed, a lot of S's right now, they say that it's best to not try to label them yourself, but rather to get them to a professional to let them be able to diagnose them.
Okay. Man, I'm excited about this. I'm just joining late, but I'm excited.
We're excited to have you. Yeah, we haven't gotten too far. We just started talking about the definition of a narcissist and the 3 main types in the grandiose, vulnerable, and malignant. And but it is a spectrum. So yeah, that's pretty much where we've gotten so far. And now we're going to tune into this video from Dr. Ramani Durvasula. I cannot say if I'm saying that correctly, but that's what I'm going on.
Okay.
And as you can see in the title here, it's Narcissism and its Discontent. And I encourage you in this video to listen to how she describes the narcissist, as well as those who are connected to narcissists, and also how society has made it kind of easier for narcissists to be narcissistic and thrive. So it's really interesting to me.
Today, I am going to talk about the most overused, misunderstood, problematic words of our time. A phenomenon, a word that is shaping all of our destinies. That word is narcissism. Narcissism is a word that is being used to understand bad behavior everywhere, in national leaders, in heads of state, heads of corporations, fancy academic types, athletes, celebrities. We actually no longer recoil at their grandiosity, their entitlement, and their incivility. In fact, too many people award them grudging admiration for their successes, and that grants permission to every abusive patterns of behavior with impunity. Now, things got confusing when people started using narcissism as a clinical term. It became a way of medicalizing bad behavior. It's actually not a diagnostic term. Narcissistic personality disorder is a diagnosis, but it's pretty rare because these folks don't show up to be diagnosed anyhow. So narcissism is in fact a personality pattern. It's a sort of way of relating to the world. It's an adjective to describe their style, much like we could describe someone as agreeable or stubborn or introverted. Some of these patterns are valued by society and others aren't. And the fact is, most people don't receive being called narcissistic as a compliment. It's just, however, a descriptive term. And no matter how much we turn our noses up at it, paradoxically, as a society, we reward it. Dr. Alan Francis was one of the architects of the diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, and he argues that we actually give badly behaved jerks an out when we call it a diagnosis. If a person's a jerk, then they're a jerk. Disliking a pattern of behavior doesn't make it a mental illness. That so-called jerk has to be experiencing problems in their lives, and for their narcissism to actually be considered a diagnosis. So if we were to cobble together all the various things that make up narcissism, we land on a very uncomfortable summit. Narcissism is comprised of certain pillars, as I call them: lack of empathy, grandiosity, entitlement, superficiality, admiration and validation seeking, hypersensitivity, rage, and a tendency to manipulate and exploit people. It's confusing because they're simultaneously under-responsive. They tend to be emotionally aloof, cold, and distant, but then they're hyper-responsive. They have hair-trigger tempers that set off like that when their fragile egos get threatened. So narcissism, however, I believe, is synonymous with pathological insecurity. The key to understanding the narcissist is that they feel constantly unstable and empty. Their grandiosity is actually an immature defense against these threats to them, their sense of self, and they're desperate for the world to keep validating them. On their good days, they look happy, they're great, they're grandiose, but on the bad days, the facade crumbles quickly, and we see disproportionate rage, shame, and vindictiveness. I became interested in narcissism through a couple of different pathways, but the most striking was the fact that more and more clients were coming into my office and talking about relationships in which their partners treated them with utter disregard, indifference, coldness. They lacked empathy, they would question their reality, they would lie to them, at times they were unfaithful, they were inconsistent, and no matter what they tried with their partner, it didn't get better. At the same time, I started working with more narcissistic clients. And would you know, nothing we tried really made things better. In fact, they just remain difficult people, and I don't think I'm that bad a therapist. So it was clear that these relationships were being kept in place simultaneously by hope and fear. Hope that someday it would get better if they kept trying harder, but fear that if they left these relationships, they'd be alone, for the fear that maybe this is as good as it gets. The world has become more insecure, and the reasons for that are varied. Gallup's annual Global Emotions Report said that 2017 was the most miserable in about a decade. The report indicated that sadness, anger, worry, stress, and physical pain were more frequently endorsed last year than in the 10 years prior. Now, Gallup speculated on a variety of that this increase in misery could reflect the increase in insecurity, incivility, and tolerance of narcissism our world supports. The increase on it, such as consumerism, to incubate and proliferate. When human value is driven entirely by external incentives such as success, then qualities such as empathy do not have a fighting chance because we no longer value them and they're no longer valuable. So why do we get pulled into these relationships? We're not flocking to narcissism because we love emotional coldness or invalidation or shallow people. We're drawn in because narcissism is seductive. I call it the 3 C's of narcissism: charm, charisma, and confidence. That's not to say that all charming and charismatic people are narcissistic. However, we do know that these traits are so seductive that we get drawn in, that are unfolding at the same time, such as entitlement, vindictiveness, or lack of empathy. So then once a person is in a relationship and it's uncomfortable and it's painful, why would they stay with a narcissist? All of us are vulnerable, or even more vulnerable to sticking around for the abuse by a narcissist if we originated from family systems in which the patterns of narcissism were normalized, such as having a cold, authoritarian, distant, invalidating, or abusive parent. Our own insecurities render us vulnerable and also less able to climb out when the climate shifts from charm and charisma to invalidation and abuse. Most of us are great at giving second chances, and second chances are in fact the accelerant for narcissism. We make excuses. That's just how he is. He didn't really mean that. She means well. That's just her culture. And there's the rub. That's how this infectious virus of being in any form of narcissistic relationship, whether with an individual or a family or a company or a culture, can slowly proliferate and take over. Most of us issue second chances with zeal. Our storytelling in our culture is immersed in tales of hope, redemption, and forgiveness. And while that's all very healthy, in the wrong hands, hope and forgiveness may not represent an opportunity for growth or change or restoration, but rather permission to just keep things going as they are. Because with narcissists, forgiveness is interpreted as, hey, let's just keep the status quo. Have we created a world in which narcissism as a pattern, as a personality, is becoming necessary to succeed in the new world order? This is where we hit a bit of a problematic divide. The very qualities associated with material success are actually bad for our health. Because while these qualities may be festered and fostered by our cultures and our schools and our economies and our societies, they are never going to be good for our close relationships. And that doesn't just mean spouses and partners. That means parents, children, siblings, extended family, friends, colleagues. Narcissistic patterns undercut the core of what's necessary for healthy relationships. Those things include mutuality, respect, compassion, patience, genuineness, honesty, and trust. Things that are simply not possible with a system or a person which is narcissistic. And it's in that intimate relationship space where we see the most profound impacts of a narcissist, whether that be a spouse or a partner. A relationship with a narcissist is a gradual indoctrination. You slowly become inured to their lack of empathy, their tantrums, their rage, their insults, and their entitlement, their lies and their challenges to your reality, or self-talk. And before you know it, your new mantra becomes, I am not enough. Anyone who's had a narcissistic parent will acknowledge that it shaped the arc of their lives. It instilled an insecurity and a chronic jousting at psychological windmills. From an early age, narcissistic parents leave a legacy, including an inability to trust your own instincts, to safely enter close relationships, to trust your own abilities, and a lifetime can be spent trying to gain the notice of the aloof, detached, and disconnected parent. The proliferation of narcissism in leadership in our culture, governments, companies, and world has made very difficult workplaces. The narcissistic boss is the insecure tyrant. These are workplaces ruled by fear and subterfuge, abuse and vindictiveness, deceit and slippery ethics. And in the face of the Me Too movement, the top notes of narcissism pervaded all of the stories. The entitled and untouchable tyrant pillaging the workforce, and in most cases, with almost no consequences. The most painful realization is that narcissistic patterns are just not that amenable to change. At a minimum, for any change to occur, the narcissist has to recognize the harmful pattern of their behavior, then they have to want to change it, and then they have to put in the daily work of change. There is a small number of cases where that's kind of happened, but under conditions of stress and frustration, the usual issues of rage will pop up, the rubber band of personality returns to its usual shape and size. The small changes that could be made may not be enough to make a close, intimate relationship sustainable. And if somebody is not willing to recognize that they need to make changes because they're hurting other people, there's little likelihood they will make the world or you for their bad behavior. So that means that the only remaining strategies are to maintain your expectations and set boundaries, not to try to change that person or waste hope on the possibility of change, but to recognize that this is how it is and either accept it or slowly step away from it. Now, this is very individual, and it's not always possible. If it's your parents or your child who's narcissistic, you may not be willing to sever that tie. Finances, culture, children, or love can make walking away from a marriage or a romantic relationship seemingly impossible, and that's fine. But managing expectations on this pattern can protect you from the downstream effects of realistic reality. Sadly, most of us put 90% of our hearts, minds, and souls into our most dysfunctional, unhealthy, invalidating relationships and save the little bit that's left for the people who are good and kind to us. It's time we flipped this skewed calculus and start giving the best of ourselves to our healthy and reciprocal relationships and really only give the bare minimum to the relationships that really aren't helping us grow. Perhaps that's a healthier way of negotiating these treacherous waters of narcissism without losing ourselves in the depths of self-doubt and self-criticism. Now, this can be extended to our thinking about the world at large. It can be small fixes, such as turning off the polarizing discourses we hear and learning to measure our self-worth and the worth of others with new metrics of success: authenticity, compassion, kindness, and empathy. We can learn to tend to our own gardens and not get pulled into hostile interactions that benefit no one. So this begs the question, can there be happy endings where narcissistic or antagonistic personalities and cultures are concerned? I actually think there can be. The greatest challenge about happy endings in real life is that they rarely look like the ones we crafted when we're young. And it's easy to get stuck in our own old narratives. People who come from narcissistic families may feel as though they missed out on having a parent who is an ally or a supporter, even as they go into adulthood. People who married narcissistic partners may find themselves mired in a nightmare of emotional abuse, or simply finding that they're actually alone despite being married. Few people write stories of their lives that build in disappointment. I have found that survivors of all kinds of narcissistic and antagonistic relationships actually can and do have happy endings. They just don't look like they thought. All of us are bigger than this epidemic of narcissism. Any of us can change the "you are not enough" narrative that still resonates. We can reparent ourselves. We can look at the entitled shenanigans of people who shriek, "Don't you know who I am?" and realize that you don't give a damn about who they are. Where there are scars, beautiful things actually can spring forth. Khalil Gibran writes, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." Yes, the world is in fact becoming more narcissistic and insecure. Don't let the global epidemic of incivility infect you. Inoculate yourself. Find your communities. Practice kindness and empathy even when other people are not. Choose your friends and your romances with care. Every life story can be a miracle or a tragedy. It just depends on how you write it. These days, with the world in such disarray, anyone who is surviving with their empathy unbroken, their heart sound, their integrity in place, and their sense of humor intact is nothing short of dauntless. Pushing back on narcissism is a human rights issue. All of us need to stop giving permission to narcissism and narcissists and start taking our lives, our souls, and our world back. Thank you.
All right. So, what do we think of the video? So many nuggets. Or anything that stood out to you or resonated with you?
There were so many. Like I wish I was like inside to write them down. But one thing that stood out, or that I can like run off the top of my head, is like the want for the person that's being narcissistic to want to change. And I may have missed it because it was going in and out. Like I couldn't hear everything she was saying.
Oh,
But I wonder what triggers them to want to change. Like how did they make that realization?
and that actually from what I've read, it has to be a personal choice. And it's just something within in recognizing recognizing the traits in them. They have to not be okay with that, and that causing them to want to change. Which, then creates the issue of how do you get them to acknowledge it? But
Right.
again, that I think is a big part of why they suggest not trying to handle it yourself, but more so focusing on getting them, and for those in relationship with them, possibly getting them together to professional help.
Yeah.
Anything else? Trying to see what I wrote down. First time I watched, I did take a lot of notes. Let's see what I put in. I thought it was interesting how she described narcissism as a personality pattern and not even a trait, as most other resources said, but as a pattern. And how the person can display all of these strong characteristics, strong negative characteristics such as lack of empathy, grandiosity, entitlement, superficiality, admiration, and validation seeking. But then also at the same time, they're very pulled back and unresponsive, emotionally aloof, cold, distant. Well, then also any point in time when their fragile egos are triggered, they can become hyper responsive and have really hot tempers and anger. And I think that for me, experiencing that through my my relationship in high school, who was actually my first love. It was very, very confusing in itself. And that confusion was actually something that, oddly enough, drew and tied me to him because I was a helper. And I loved him and he loved me. And love can conquer all. And as we'll see in another video, that one, or no, it was in this video, excuse me, that hope is a very strong thing. I even would attribute my hope to being a stronger attachment than my fear. Though the fear of, losing the one, because he was my first love, and thinking, there isn't something better beyond this. That is real. But my hope in things being better or looking like they did when we first started, and he was showing the 3 C's, the charm, charisma, and confidence, that we could get back to that. So yes, definitely could relate. Anyone else? Take that as a no. All right. So we will move on to the next.
Wait,
Oh,
wait.
Oh, okay. All right.
I've been looking for my phone all around this house.
Oh.
I'm like, gosh, because I can hear you, and you're like, anyone else? I'm like, she knows I want to say something.
I thought so, but wait.
Anyone else? Crickets. I'm like looking for my phone. So I'm sorry, just had a moment because I just found it. Thank you, Jesus. Oh God. I'm like, look, I gotta talk. Well, oh my goodness. That was crazy. Y'all don't even know. I'm running around this house like that. Anyway. Oh my goodness. So my last boyfriend, I can't diagnose him, but there were definitely signs of narcissist or narcissism or narcissistic characteristics. And what I will say that jumped out to me from the video was, I think she said something like sabotage or vindictive. vindictive. And so for me, that came out after I broke up with him. I guess he didn't realize, like, oh, this girl's really breaking up with me. But after a couple weeks of not talking to him, not engaging with him, he realized that I was really serious. And so that's when he was like triggered to action. So he began to stalk me, and basically what his goal was to make me think I was going crazy. And he always told me in our relationship that, you know, there's a guy in his old neighborhood that he grew up in that went crazy, and it's because the guy's wife left him. And my ex-boyfriend, usually they give you signs that like they are totally not okay. So he told me on a different occasion while we were dating, like, oh, I used to hate women. Anytime a man tells you straight up that they used to hate women, that is an indicator of something very serious, because it shows the depths of pain. And it's not a used to. That used to is to make you kind of like, oh, it's done with. And what I've found is a lot of things he said he used to do, he still did. Like, I guess the narcissist tries to like psych themselves out into thinking there's something different. Like that she was saying on the video, they're not going to tell, hey, I need help, because the narcissism is in the way. And so he would say things, and I didn't realize, like, you know, this stuff was so always like intertwined with some foolishness. It was in confusion, like they also alluded to. So it's always going to be a lot of confusion, a lot of foolishness, a lot of like, you're trying to help. That's what you notice when you're trying to do all this helping. You want to be their friend. They come to you with all these wounds. They're bleeding out, and needing you to bandage them up. And you try, because it's in our nature to help. So I just wanted to briefly speak about that. But what happened is we broke up, and he really was triggered, and he wanted to literally make me think I was going crazy. So he started to, his behavior, I could tell, like, man, this is his goal. His goal is to make me lose my mind. And this is really sad for a person who supposedly loved you at one point to have that much in them that's making them like turn completely on you. So it's a very, 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 very important subject that we're dealing with today. And I just, I hope more and more people become aware of this. And what I will say, I want to just say this real quick before we transition to the next segment or topic, but I myself had to look within myself to figure out what drew the narcissistic personality to me. And I'm still doing that, because what I found was I attracted this guy and I allowed him in, but also my roommate, my old roommate, she also had like little signs of like narcissistic type stuff, like just severe control and stuff like that. And then I said, Lord, let me look at myself too, like what's in me. And I've said, I have in the past wanted to have a level of control and stuff out of wanting to protect myself and others. And so I began to look within myself as well, and to try to see, like, Lord, is that in me? But what I will tell you is he showed me a whole new level of narcissism. I was like, whoa, so, I'm still a little baffled at some of the things he did and said. And me just holding on. I think it was the whole thing, like COVID-19, the world's coming to an end. I need to have a boo thing before it's all said and done. And just really believing lies and allowing myself to be joined to someone who showed severe signs of mental illness, just because, I didn't want to believe that. And I was hoping to have this love, as our world seemed to be falling apart and being so disconnected, looking for connection, because I'm away from home, all these different things. So I wanted to kind of speak a little bit on this, but I think
I need to unpack my story even more, but it definitely connects to this whole subject. And I appreciate y'all listening to my little points.
Yes, thank you for sharing, sis. All of what you said definitely his points from the video, as well as others that we are about to see in this next video, who is, or the speaker is Mata Tisaya Papadaku. And again, that's what I'm going with. I'm not sure if I am pronouncing that correctly. But she is a survivor. Oh, let me turn my volume up here. She's a survivor of a 5-year abusive relationship. And she shares, because in many cases, the narcissists, as Mo just said, they will try to get you back. And with some women, they are able to go back. For me, in my mentally, emotionally abusive relationship, we were on and off for probably about 2 years. So she shares her insights on what caused her to stay, but then also what eventually caused her to leave. I think I need to go back here. So we'll go ahead and watch this, because I
came up with this.
okay, sorry. I found it very interesting how she explained her reasoning for, or her mental reasoning for staying. I never thought about it like this, but I can see how it's possible. And how even in my situation, I may have thought of it like this, but hadn't fully put it together as such. And I know I'm kind of talking around it, but I want to let her say it. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Let's talk about abuse. There's a world of misunderstanding and ignorance when it comes to abuse. Why does she stay? Why does a victim of abuse stay under the most horrific, life-threatening situation? Why doesn't she just leave? Why did I not leave? Between the ages of 23 and 28, I was in an abusive relationship. And if you had asked me then to give it a name, abuse never would have come to mind. You see, in my mind, I thought abused women were uneducated, low-income families, and that some sort of abuse was involved in the equation. I graduated college with honors. My parents, so I came from an upper middle-class family. And my abuser, whether he was using a substance or not, was still physically abusive, emotionally abusive, sexually abusive, psychologically abusive. Before I begin my story, I'd like to draw your attention to the screen. Psychotherapist Lenore Walker came up with this theory. She interviewed 1,500 victims of abuse in the late 1970s, and she came up with this theory, and it's called the cycle of abuse. It begins in the tension-building phase. That's where the humiliation begins. The victim may attempt to control the situation by keeping the abuser calm and literally walking on eggshells. The second phase is the incident, the violent, the outbreak. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It could be emotional. There's a thing as emotional abuse. It's brainwashing, and it's making the victim believe that she is in danger, not worthy, and useless. After this incident is the honeymoon phase. Now, the honeymoon phase, as it says, the victim responds, the abuser feels remorse, feels shame, and begs for forgiveness. The victim, this is the stage where she normally decides to stay. And I'll tell you why. Because I know she has her power back. In the middle of all this, you'll see denial. And we are not talking about denial in Egypt. We're talking about denial, about the elephant in the room that is sitting on my face, and I'm pretending everything's fine. Now, the second slide is it's again from Leonore Walker. She also developed the concept of the battered woman syndrome, where she finds unique patterns of behavior, emotional, that women have when they become victims of abuse. And it is, many analysts suggest that the battered woman syndrome is also a subtype of PTSD. So I will refer to my abuser as Romeo. And the reason I chose Romeo is because it represents the kind of love I believed in. The kind of love that I saw on television and in movies and I read about. The kind of love that he would die for me and I would die for him. When our relationship began, obviously he did not come to the door and greet me with, "Is that what you're wearing? You look cheap. Oh my God, please don't talk and embarrass me. And if you overstep, you know what's coming." That's not how it started. It started with romance and love, and he hit hard and he hit fast, because that's what abusers do. That's the way our relationship was at the end, though, obviously. But regardless of that, I had become accustomed to men pursuing me because I was a model at the time. And believe it or not, models were pretty insecure. We were used to people telling us everything that's wrong with us to our face and people cutting us down. So I was very, very insecure to begin with when I entered the relationship with Romeo, because he was one of the few men in my life at the time that seemed to really take an interest in me, to really care what I was doing every single moment of the day. I remember at the beginning of our relationship, another model asked me to go out of town to model with her. And I asked him, and mind you, at the time, Romeo was very generous, and he gave me many gifts. I know you're probably thinking, poor little model, oh, poor girl. Well, this is one way of an abuser, how he takes control. He takes control by taking economics in control, in his own hands. So when I was asked to go model at a fashion show outside of Athens, my abuser started crying and begging me not to go. "Please don't go. I'm gonna lose you, and if I lose you, I'll die." And me, being a codependent and having problems with boundaries and generally having an allergy to the word no, obviously, I said no. How can I upset the man that I love? How can I do that? So, in his opinion, I had also no reason to go because he was taking care of me. And this is how I handed him over one big part of my freedom. When we first met, he adored my friends. He adored them. Obviously, as the relationship progressed and he wanted to have full control of me, he started planting seeds of mistrust and betrayal of my friends. Obviously, I started backing off and believing that he was the only person that really loved me. Eventually, by this time, I am economically, emotionally dependent on him. And as a result, him having his conquest in his back pocket, he focused on his career and his friends and everything else but me. So I started feeling abandoned. I would linger in the shadows, waiting for him to look my way, to pay attention to me. And this is how our cycle began eventually, because at some point I got so bored of sitting in the shadows, I told him, I'm gonna go work as a model again. And he went crazy. And it was our first violent physical episode. He showed remorse right away, begged and cried for my forgiveness, and I had my power back. I had his attention back. I was his only, and nothing else mattered. And obviously, I didn't go. But the abuse didn't stop there. We got into our cycle again, and he started becoming more and more, like he would humiliate me even more. He would make fun of me to his friends, my accent, the way I dressed, anything that you can imagine. He would find, and he would roll his eyes and turn his back on me in front of his friends. He would dismiss me constantly. And when the embarrassment and the loneliness got too much, I would retaliate. And I would say, I'm leaving, I can't take this anymore. And here's the abuse again. Here's the cycle again. He would lash out, he would be physical, he would scream and yell, throw things, break things. And then he would feel remorse, and he'd be mine again. So one night, again in this cycle of abuse, one night when we decided to go out with his friends, he was again in that phase of ignoring me and not paying attention to me at all. And I got into the car, and he looked at me and he said, is that what you're wearing? Because you look cheap. Are you looking for any boyfriend? I was like, no, no. You know, like, I'm walking on eggshells. I have to show him love and attention. I was, no, I'm just yours and nobody else's. He looked at me, he rolled his eyes, and he said, anyways, we're late. Don't worry about it. He takes off. We went to the club. He ignored me all night while I sat in a corner. At some point, he disappeared completely. I went looking for him, to find him at a bar drinking with 3 women. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. My world shattered. He didn't love me. It wasn't real. He wasn't really Romeo. And I did the only thing I could. I ran. And he ran after me. In the middle of the parking lot, he started throwing me around like a Raggedy Ann doll. He punched me, he spat at me, he hit me. He threw me in their car, he threw me out of the car. Bouncers were standing there staring. Did nothing. They turned their back. Regardless to say, I broke up with Romeo. And I disappeared. He would try to call me, I wouldn't pick up. Eventually, he had his sister call me. And his sister said to me that Romeo is devastated. He can't eat, he can't sleep. He needs you, he loves you. I said, what? She said, he loves you. That's why he did this. He loves you. I believed her. That moment, when I heard that, a sigh of relief came over my body. All the pain of being away from him was gone. I believed her that the reason he reacted like that was because he loved me. And I knew right then and there that when he came back, when he came asking for me again, I would take him back. Regardless to say, the cycle continued. The hostage taking, the making me feel crazy by irrational behavior, and holding me hostage to his demands. That was the least of it. He would choke me and hit me and lock me up. I would wake up every morning and I would wonder, what kind of mood is he going to be in today? Is he going to be in a good mood? Are we going to have a good day? Or is he going to be cranky? And I'm the one to blame for the red light that's caught us or that the weather is bad. What kind of day are we going to have today? Obviously, this continued on and on. But the honeymoon phase became shorter and shorter to the point it didn't exist anymore. I eventually found out from one of his dear, dear friends, who probably pitied me. I probably looked really desperate, and told me that Romeo had many, many, many girlfriends. And it was exactly what I needed to hear to walk away. Maybe a few months went by. Oh, I forgot to mention, he let me walk away. He was probably so completely bored of me. A few months went by, and I decided to start being social. I started going out. Romeo heard Athens is small. And he came knocking on my door. I made the huge mistake of opening the door. And to be honest, to this day, the events of that evening are still a blur to me. What I do recall is at some point in our struggles, he took a knife and he had put it through my throat and said, if I can't have you, no one will. And he lifted the knife up and he came down. I thought, this is it. I'm going to die. This is it. My life is over. He hit the couch. Somehow, I remember he grabbed me, threw me outside, my sandals in the middle of the street, put me in his car and started driving like a madman up towards the mountaintop and saying, I am going to kill you tonight. You are dying. If I can't have you, no one will. I was so scared. I really believed him. I really did. And somehow I grabbed his phone and I was able to call my father. And my father negotiated for my life. And somehow he talked him down. To this day, I still don't know what Daddy said, but God bless him. He had called the police as well, waiting for me outside my house. Romeo, too embarrassed to take me right to my front door, and scared. He got scared. He left me there, and I saw the red lights, and the neighbors all staring at me, and that walk of shame. That shame was, I can't even describe it. And I walked up towards my house, and the policeman looked at me and he said, who's your perpetrator? I said, no one. That's right, I said no one. Because an addict protects their first love. And that's exactly what I did. I was addicted to Romeo. I was addicted to the pattern of behavior. I was addicted to that type of love. But I knew I was sick and tired. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I had to do something. So I told everybody. I told my parents. I had gotten a job at a hospital. I told the security staff there, if he comes around, don't let him in. I had my best friend move in with me, so that way when he came knocking on the door, she would say, go away, and he would. So eventually he did leave me alone. He really did. He let me go. A friend of mine asked me, the one that moved in with me, she said, how do you see your relationship in 10 years if you go back to him? And all I felt was turning feeling in my stomach and loneliness and darkness and no hope. Does anybody know what it's like to wake up in the morning and not have hope or dreams? I said, I can't live like this. He had taken everything from me. The thought was enough for me to walk away and never look back. I was lucky and I was blessed because the next man that I met, he was very kind and gentle, my gentle giant, George Papadakos, and we have 3 beautiful children together. Around 2006, I was asked to go represent Greece in an international pageant for the Mistresses of the World. It's called Mrs. Globe. And Mrs. Globe is an annual fundraiser for the WIN Foundation International, Women in Need. And they run programs that name awareness and information and help heal souls all over the world. And this is where I first heard the word abuse. And this is where I put the dots together and I understood I was abused. There was a name to it. It had a name. I won that title. I was so lucky. And with this newfound information and vigorous honesty and learning about myself and how I had to heal, because then the relationship was left behind years. The wounds were still there. They were still deep. I still felt them. So I started arming myself with tools and information on how to heal. And I put my crown to use, and I started WIN Alas. And WIN Alas has been healing hearts since 2006, informing women about the issues of abuse and offering free programming to them. Despite the Cinderella syndrome and the media bestows on us, and despite my grandmother's belief that I have to find a man that can save me, I'm raising my son not to find a woman in distress to save, and I'm definitely not raising my daughters to believe that they need Prince Charming to save them. So, to all the women out there that don't know they're in an abusive relationship but are in pain, there is information out there. You can heal. And this is a conversation all of us have to be having. It's important to involve men in this conversation. Men need to be a part of this movement. Time is up. No man has the right to suppress you, to hurt you, to make you feel less than. I am living proof that your abuse does not and should not define you. Thank you.
All right. So, wow. There's a lot in her story. But before I share my thoughts, what resonated with you all?
I'll just say really quick, one thing that stuck out to me, sometimes throughout the story, to be honest, I was a little aggravated with the stuff that she was falling for. However, with this sensitive subject, it was nice to hear her story or hear her tell her story. And she's explaining why she went back. It made sense. I never thought of it that way. Like, you're upset, you're ready to leave. And then he says, I'm sorry, or gives you that attention that you wanted. Now you feel like, oh, well, if you're going to go ahead and pay attention, I'll stick it out, I'll stay. So it makes sense. Now, so all the times when I've heard of friends like going through stuff and I'm just like, why are you staying? Why are you staying? It now makes sense why people do choose to stay. So I'm glad, even though at times I was getting aggravated, I'm glad she told the story because now I understand from her perspective what the reasons were. Not just, oh, I was afraid to start over. There was psychological, like mental, emotional things going on to make her feel like, oh, okay, well, if you're, for the time being, it looks like you're giving me what I want, I don't have to leave. So that's one part that resonated with me because I needed that understanding.
I'm so glad you said that because that was definitely my purpose for sharing it, because that was a question that I used to get. My friends would be like, why are you with him? Leave him. You know, your problems will be done. And it really isn't that simple because you do love this person. You become connected to them and dependent on them. Even in high school, though, you know, I wasn't economically clearly dependent on him, through the mental and emotional abuse, I was emotionally dependent on him. And also at times when I did leave or say we need to take a break, the love bombing, which if you don't know, is basically a whole lot of love all at once, which is also a confusing tactic. It makes you feel wanted again, like you did in the beginning, and reminds you of that charismatic, caring, sweet person that they showed themselves to be at first. So yeah, it's not so simple, especially when you're in it, because just as she said, she didn't recognize it as abuse until years later, married with kids.
Right.
She didn't
That
recognize
makes sense.
it. And I didn't recognize that it was an abusive relationship until I was out of it too. When you're in it, they truly consume you so much that you really don't have the capacity to understand what's happening to you. And I'm not sure who iPhone is, but could you expound more on what you mean by a lot of triggers, love triggers? Either in the chat or yeah.
Well, this Jaya.
Oh,
So like just how you were saying like love bombs and things like that, like love triggers, you know, like it'd be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry I did this, and then and it gets overwhelming, and then you're like, really? Like now I gotta sit here and contemplate and think and then you overthinking a lot of things, and then you feel like you're wrong. So it's like you said, confusion. So that's how I was like, love triggers, because it's like triggering you to go back into it, and you know it's not right, but it's making you go back into it.
Mhm. Yeah, and it also incites that hope that in you going back, that all of what they're saying, all the sweet things they're saying are true, and that it can go back to how it was in the beginning. And she did share some, but I wanted to share a bit more of the thoughts and things that go through the mind of someone in a narcissistic relationship. And I'm saying someone because though a lot of times we attribute narcissism with men, and statistically they are more prone to it, there are women that do that are narcissistic in their relationships as well. But the other individual in the relationship may have these thoughts or feelings. You no longer feel like the person you used to be. You feel more anxious and less confident than you used to be. You often wonder if you're being too sensitive. You feel like everything you do is wrong. You always think it's your fault when things go wrong. You're apologizing often. You have a sense that something's wrong, but aren't able to identify what it is. You often question whether your response to your partner is appropriate, and you make excuses for your partner's behavior. So, yeah, it's a lot. I don't even really know what else to say right there. It's just it's a lot that they're throwing at you, and that also you're dealing with within yourself, because yes, you're taking what they're saying and what they're doing, but then also within yourself you have your own inner battle of as Jaya said, I know this is wrong, but I have hope, and they're showing love. And so you have this inner turmoil within yourself, along with whatever outer experience that you're having. So yes, that's why it's critically important that we're able to try to understand what those individuals are going through, and try to provide the support that they need. And I do have one more video I want to share, and it's more the double check how long it is. Okay, it's 10 minutes. All right. Mental psychological aspect, because that is actually does, and it can go on for years really before you get into the physical aspect. There was another lady whose story I watched who shared that in her relationship there was psychological abuse for 8 years before he even got physical. So this is definitely an important and critical part of it, and also of abuse, and also the character of a narcissist. Okay.
You're so stupid. You're lucky you have me. Nobody else would ever want you. Oh, shut up. Don't give me that look. You don't know how good you have it. You suck at that. You're never going to amount to anything. Don't you know how much I love you? Abuse can be obvious. It can leave bruises. Abuse can also be less obvious and leave only internal pain and suffering. Whether physical or psychological, abuse is a form of bullying that undermines a person's self-esteem, tears families apart, and takes lives. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women in the US. Every day, in this country alone, more than 3 women are murdered by their partners or loved ones. Almost half of all men and women in the US have experienced psychological abuse by an intimate partner. Many experience it on a daily basis. When people think of domestic violence or relationship abuse, they often think of the stereotypes that go along with it. The truth is, no one is immune to domestic violence. It can affect anyone, no matter race, gender, socioeconomic background, education, religion, sexual, the types of abuse that occur the most, yet are the least talked about: psychological and verbal abuse. I grew up in a house with my mother, father, and 3 siblings. I grew up in an unsafe house, in a house filled with yelling, cursing, and pain. It is really difficult to describe the way my father hurt my family. He had a way to make us feel worthless. He knew each of our weaknesses and imperfections and always found a time to point them out. Although my father was not physically abusive, we feared him. Whenever I stood up for myself or my family, he would corner me in my room and spew such anger and hatred that I feared for my life. One of the most difficult parts of living with an abuser is the unpredictability. Some days, we would be like a normal family. Sometimes he would go for weeks without lashing out at us. It gave us all such false hope. But of course, someone would say something that he didn't like, or do something that he perceived as wrong, or listen to music when he didn't want to listen to it, or even laugh too much, and he would go off again. It was like this ticking time bomb ready to explode at any moment. Then he would make us feel guilty, as if we had really done something so awful to upset him like that, as if we deserved the things he said and the names he called us, as if we deserved the humiliation and the shame. He would control us and our thoughts, and after growing up with his voice inside my head at all times, I started to believe that the things he said were true. I started to believe that I was ugly, fat, stupid, worthless, and never going to amount to anything. It's been 2 years since my mom gained the courage to leave him. I finally have a safe, positive, loving house to come home to, with no one telling us our feelings are invalid, no one telling us to turn down our music when we are singing and dancing in the kitchen, and no one to tell us to stop laughing. When my father left, it was as if we could all finally breathe again. In fact, a few days after my father finally moved out of the house, my younger brother smiled up at me and told me that he no longer had to sleep facing his door at night, as if my father was some kind of monster that might be lurking outside his room. Nobody deserves to live this way. And yet, many of you might be in a situation similar to the one I was in. When I was younger, I thought that I was the only one who had experienced this. I thought I was all alone. I had heard of domestic violence before, but never realized that psychological abuse was just as real as physical abuse. Our society defines domestic violence in terms of bruises. It is time to acknowledge the internal scars of psychological and verbal abuse. It is so easy to get trapped in an abusive relationship, and yet it is so difficult to escape. Whether you are a teenager or an adult, you can get caught in an unhealthy relationship. To help you recognize one, I'd like to share 5 common signs of abuse. Now, although these are usually prominent elements of abuse, every situation is unique. 1, you'll be swept off your feet. In the beginning of the relationship, it will be everything you ever wanted. The fairy tale every kid grows up hearing about. You'll be told that you're beautiful, and you'll be showered with compliments, and you may even fall in love. But before you know it, you will be blamed and humiliated. You will be told that you are not enough, and you may even start to feel as though you are not enough. 2, your partner will force you to get rid of the things that make you you. By doing this, your partner will brainwash you and make you leave behind your old identity. 3, to gain control, your partner will isolate you from your friends and loved ones and make you dependent on them. 4, the abuser will scream, yell, and curse at you, and always find a time to point out your imperfections and mistakes. 5, your partner will deny they ever did something wrong and blame you for their actions. People shy away from conversations about domestic violence because it's easier to try to sweep it under the rug and ignore it than it is to face the difficulties and complexities of abuse. But this is the reason why we need to talk about it. I speak to you today to educate, to raise awareness, and to inspire change. I speak to all of those kids that are in my shoes. You are not alone. I speak for the millions of others around the world who have stories similar to mine, but who do not have a voice to share them. Thank you.
Okay, so that one I wanted to share coming from a different angle of domestic abusive relationships with family members, because that is also very, very prevalent as well. But what are some of our thoughts or takeaways from that video?
Well, I would say that a lot of times it's a cycle, and a lot of times, you know, it's like you attract somehow the very thing you're trying to get away from sometimes, because I think a lot of people are like deceived because it's a lot of deception in the narcissistic type of relationship. And the way they do things is very deceptive. So it's like a promise for something different, but it's more of the same, really. So you're leaving maybe your family that's abusive, looking for a way out, but then you're looking to a guy to be your way out, potentially, just hypothetically speaking, and then that person has maybe some kind of control because you have no one else. And then sometimes they, power up in their narcissism or whatever, because they're like, oh, you don't have any other choice. And you're with me, and I can, just really take advantage of this situation. And that's why I think there is it's important for us, or women for sure, to have a level of individuality where you don't necessarily go into a relationship because you need it, but it's because you want it more so. So being able to be self-sufficient in a lot of ways is important, I think, because sometimes that invites people who have who want to abuse, that kind of opens the door for the abuser to try to take that position where they'll take advantage. But yeah, it's just kind of a cycle. I think that's what I wanted to say, is sometimes a cycle. And so when you come from that type of family, sometimes you enter into those types of relationships, because sometimes it's weird how you can attract or be attracted to something that you don't really want. And you end up in the very place where you're like, I don't want this. So.
Yes, so very true. Great nugget. Anyone else?
I agree with that one. I just agree with what you said 1000%. Like, as you was saying it, like, I just had like this epiphany, like it clicked. I was like, that's exactly what it is. I couldn't have said it better. Like, I just loved how you explained that. So I just wanted to say thank you for saying that, because that was very eye-opening. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other thoughts or connections? All right. I know our time is coming to an end, and I definitely want to be cognizant of your time, respectful of your time. So I will just take a couple more minutes just to share about dealing with or interacting with narcissists in a healthy way, or a healthier way than we may have in the past or currently dealing with. Because as we've learned, you can deal with narcissists in pretty much any area of your life: romantic, familial, work, society. They're everywhere. And even if they're not necessarily a full-blown narcissist, some people may have narcissistic characteristics. And again, say you're at work, you can't necessarily just pull away from them. Or if they're your family or your loved one, you may not fully be willing to. But how do you do so? How do you interact with them in a way that it is healthy or healthier for you? So there's 3 different categories that I broke it down into. And I will start with directly. So this is either any type of relation that you may have with them when you are yourself interacting with a narcissist. Some ways to help you in that is understanding that it won't be easy, especially if they are not seeking help or even acknowledging those narcissistic characteristics or traits. Learn coping mechanisms that work for you in your dealing with them. Make sure to set boundaries, as we've often talked about. And also practice self-care, because in short, the narcissist's tact and sometimes target is to tear you down. But if you are able to build yourself up and set proper boundaries and find ways of coping to help you to not stay in that negative space, then their tactics can't be as effective with you, which may help in them not acting that way with you. Or if they continue to, you have that built up within you to where it doesn't affect you as grossly as it could. Now, adding on to that, for those who may be in a relationship with a narcissist, a romantic relationship, some helpful tips would be to be honest and realistic about the condition of the relationship, and also, as with any relationship, accepting that they will be difficult to deal with, because again, you can't change them. For a narcissist to change, they have to acknowledge their narcissistic behaviors themselves, want to change it for themselves, and also be willing to put in the work every day consistently. None of that can you do. So you have to accept that and be honest with yourself so that you can then try to help yourself honestly in understanding that you can't change them. They will be difficult to deal with. Prayerfully, if you are able to get them to agree to counseling, either for themselves or couples counseling, you may be able to see some progress. But understanding, as long as you're in it, that this is who you're dealing with, and take off the rose-colored glasses and really take an honest assessment of the relationship and where you're at and where they're at. Don't try to challenge them directly. If you do decide to address them, yes, if you do choose to address them, don't try to challenge them directly. Again, try to get them to go to a licensed professional to get that assistance with someone who has experience in getting a narcissist to acknowledge and help them work through how to make those changes. Because a narcissist does not like to be addressed. So with you already being conditioned, they will employ tactics to try to basically get you back into your place. Where a licensed professional is, one, detached from the situation, and two, equipped with the knowledge and the experience and the tools to be able to work through whatever the narcissist will try to throw at them, and also be able to help the narcissist. Yes, I did say that right. Okay. And finally, if you must confront the narcissist, don't do so in a crowd, because again, their egos are fragile. And in the case where there's a crowd, they may try to save face and then do something either physically or mentally to hurt you. So it's important to protect yourself. And that's along with also, as has been said in the other videos, don't let yourself be isolated. In fact, try to surround yourself with those who love you, who are empathetic to you, who are supportive of you. And that's something that we'll get into with this last section, which is helping a friend who you recognize is dating or involved with a narcissist. And that is, know that coming in at them bluntly will usually cause them to shut down or shut you out. So you want to try to be empathetic and create a supportive space to where they feel comfortable coming to you and sharing with you. And though as someone outside looking in bird's eye view, it can get aggravating at times, they really need you to be supportive of them. Not necessarily the situation, but supportive of them, and build them up and encourage them and love on them, because they're not getting it from the one who has unfortunately become their main source. And encourage them in seeking therapy for themselves first, as well as couples therapy. And, you know, in assessing the situation, you know your friend more than, you know, I would, and every situation is different. So it may be better to suggest the couples counseling. They may not be willing to go by themselves, but they may see the benefit in going together. But some form of counseling would help and benefit them. And those are all the tips I have for that. Any additional tips or thoughts?
This is Brittany Monique. I just want to say, be patient. Be patient with the process. You didn't get into the situation overnight. And generally, when you, personally speaking, when you date a narcissist, it's because of a mindset prior to dating that person that's a little off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even just the time you're in the relationship, but it's also the mindset prior to you going into the relationship. So it takes time to really get yourself together after you have gone through being in a relationship with a narcissist or a narcissistic type of person, narcissistic kind of person. I just want to say that because personally, I'm looking at myself and I'm just like, oh, I should be over this by now. And I should be, and in a lot of ways I am, but just because you're separated from the person doesn't mean that you're not, you know, maybe beating yourself up on the inside about the fact that you allowed yourself to go through this for so long, and you allow, you know, because you feel like you should be so much smarter sometimes after the fact. You're like, how did I fall for that? Like, I believe that was Mia who said that. Like, how did I fall? Oh, no, was it Marie? Was it Marie? I'm sorry. I don't know exactly who it was, but I know she was saying she got triggered. Like, how do you fall for certain things? But later on, a lot of times you look at yourself and say to yourself, how did I fall for that? Like, why did I stay in that? And you can be a little bit hard on yourself. So just be patient with your healing process and everyone's different, and just do everything you can in your power to heal, and just keep seeking healing, and then to heal others with what you've learned through going through the fire. No, I'm just
No, you're not.
going through all of, I mean, it's like you out there in the middle of the jungle, you know? So anywho, I love you guys. Thank you, sis.
You're welcome. Thank you. That definitely, yes, for those who do make it out. Because unfortunately, there are those who do. They stay in the cycle within the relationship. They stay in it till death do them part. And sadly, many a times it's by the hands of their abuser. And another, oh, you have something to add, B?
I was just, as everyone was talking, I was thinking about some of the things that I went through with some people that acted like that and how it made me feel. So I was just resonating on that. And sometimes, you know, when you're with somebody who's like that and the type of negativity they pour into you, it really can break you. So just like with I'm sorry, I forgot who said it, being patient with yourself, because there were so many times that I beat myself up, felt really, thank you, Mo, felt low because I'm letting someone tell me like, oh, you need to do something about the weight you're gaining, to the point where I'm not eating or I'm starving myself. So you really do have to be patient with yourself in the process of healing and moving forward from being with someone who's like that. It takes a lot. It drains you. It's very exhausting. So I just wanted to say that.
And I appreciate you saying that. I do. It's exhausting. That's the word that came out. Exhausting. I mean, it's, whew, it does a number. It does a number on people for sure.
Mhm. Yes. And that makes me think of, along with being patient with yourself, also being intentional about building yourself up and combating those negative thoughts that have now been planted in your mind. And also being continuously patient with yourself, even when you feel that you've moved past the majority of your trauma. Like I think it was Mara. Is that how you say her name? Mara. Like she shared that a therapist attributed those the experience of those who have come out of domestic violence situations as part of PTSD. And just like others who experience it, you may have triggers that stay with you throughout life. And you may have episodes that may seem to come out of nowhere when you're doing just fine. And being able to recognize that and still be patient with yourself and love yourself through it is very important. And on that note, we will wrap it up. I do thank you for the extra time that you all have shared with me. I do want to end in prayer. Does anyone have any specific prayer requests?
I want prayer because I am still healing from a narcissistic relationship or being in a relationship with a narcissist. So please pray for me. I am getting better, but it's definitely something I want to just put more focus on. And just asking God to take people out of my life that need to be removed and add people that need to be added, and to keep the ones that need to remain. Hallelujah.
Amen. Any other prayer requests? Okay. We will go ahead and pray. Father God, thank you for this time today that we've spent together. Thank you for this information and new revelations. Thank you for this safe space to share and in doing so, help each other and grow with each other. And Lord God, I pray that this message will resonate with us wherever it needs to, Lord God. For those of us who may have dealt with these relationships in the past, and for those of us who are recognizing these relationships currently, please help us, Lord, to clearly recognize those and to realize in what way we may need to deal with it, may need to address it, may need to move away from it. And Lord God, if there are any narcissistic relationships that we may be dealing with, Lord God, that are hurting us, I pray, Lord God, that you will remove them right now. Just uproot them out of our lives, Lord, and help us to be able to recognize it as such. and give you the praise, honor, and glory for it. And I do specifically lift up my sister Mo to you now, Lord God, as you are currently healing her heart. And I pray, Father God, that you will give her the patience, the love, the wisdom and discernment that she needs through her healing process. And I thank you, Holy Spirit, that you are with her now, Lord, and that you are the ultimate comforter. And I pray, Lord, that she will experience your comfort in a special, unique, awesome way that helps her through this time. Please just continue to heal her heart. And as she seeks you and seeks understanding of the different aspects that contributed to it, I pray, Lord, that you will guard her up and guide her in it, that it will not harm her any further, but that she will only grow from it and through it and come out stronger and able to avoid such relationships moving forward, and also be able to be a listening ear and a support and an advocate for others who she may recognize as going through such relationships in the future. And I pray, Lord, that you would help us all to be advocates, to exude your love, and be supporters and empathize with those that we may recognize as going through these situations. Give us the right words or actions. Help us to know when we may not need to give any words, but to just be there in love and to be a support. And Lord God, anything else that we may be dealing with, maybe bring to you in prayer. I pray for those things that you would reveal, that you would pour out your blessings and favor, that they may be addressed and done and so. And it's in Jesus' name that I do pray all these things. Amen. All right.
Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. As always, I do not take your time, your attention, your insights, and contributions lightly. I so appreciate you all. I love you, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day and weekend. And we will talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.